Moving on, I got to show you this clip because to me, it literally is an amazing visual of just what a sham the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of these elitist outlets are. And I want to be clear, you know, occasionally they do a good job. You know, Washington Post, give them credit. They did a great story. It didn't get enough attention, that we've basically been pissing away money, billions and trillions of dollars in Afghanistan for absolutely no reason. Absolutely no reason. Washington Post, good job on that story. 1 out of 100 ain't bad. The New York Times occasionally does a good story or two. I just read you one. But overall, these people are so out of touch. They literally, if you give them a choice, you want to go have a beer or go to a, you know, go to a Garfunkel, Simon and Garfunkel concert with Bernie, or you want to go have Chardonnay with Buttigieg, what do you think they're going to do? This is the coastal elite. So the New York Times, in their interviews with candidates, they're coming out with their endorsement. Oh, they're coming out with their endorsement Sunday, and I'll be live. Come here. I want to bring you on. Come. Come, because we're having an argument about who they're going to endorse. Come on. My girlfriend's going to come on real quick.
Oh, my God.
I've said that they're going to endorse Biden. What do you think?
Klobuchar.
Why do you think they're going to endorse Klobuchar?
Because I think Biden's too obvious, and I think he's just fucked up so many times.
But why would the New York Times? They always do the most obvious and predictable thing. They're the New York Times.
I don't agree.
And Klobuchar doesn't. Klobuchar is literally at like 6 or 7% in Iowa.
I thought you just said she was 10% somewhere.
That's New Hampshire.
I don't know.
I think if it's not going to be Biden, I think it's going to be Warren.
After the shenanigans with Warren, I don't think.
They love the shenanigans with Warren. They were part of the shenanigans with Warren. You don't want to be on camera, do you? So I want to show you this clip. This is Bernie with the New York Times, and they ask him about, like, how did Trump win and what is it symbolic of? And I think the person who asked him was asking him in the context of racism. And, you know, how do we stamp this out? So take a look at their faces. Take a look at their faces when Bernie answers this question. It's truly remarkable.
What about the fact that Trump has touched a chord in 40 to 44% of the people? What about that issue? It's like Trump is a symptom of a widespread problem.
Yes.
So, I mean, how do you address that?
What is the issue? How did Trump become president? Not everybody, but tens and tens of millions of Americans feel that the political establishment, Republican and Democrat, have failed them. Maybe the New York Times has failed them too.
That explains the appeal of racism?
Yeah. People are, in many cases in this country, working longer hours for low wages. You are aware of the fact that in an unprecedented way, life expectancy is actually going down in America because of diseases of despair. People have lost hope, and they are drinking, they're doing drugs, they're committing suicide. And when that condition arises, whether it was the 1930s in Germany, then people are susceptible to the blame game, to say that it is the undocumented people in this country who are the cause of all of our problems. And if we just throw 10 million people out of the country, you're going to have a good job, and you're going to have good health care, and you have good education. That's all we got to do. So all over the world, Trump didn't invent demagoguery. It's an age-old weapon, and you take a minority, and you demonize that minority, and you blame that minority, and you take the despair and the anger and the frustration that people are feeling, and you say that's the cause of your problem.
Imagine for just 1 second, if Bernie Sanders is able to say that on a debate stage in front of Donald Trump. Wow. But there's so many elements of this. First of all, I don't want to minimize racism because I covered the campaign. I interviewed a lot of Donald Trump supporters. There is a racial component to why they support Donald Trump. I don't think it's why Donald Trump won the election, but there is racism, and Donald Trump has given permission for people with straight up racial sentiments, not racism because they're economically hurting, not racism because they lost their job, but just racist because they don't like black people and they don't want the country to change. So that's a real thing. I've seen it. Let's not minimize it. But I also think that has been used as a crutch. It has been used by a crutch, just like the sexism thing is used by a crutch for female supporters of Hillary Clinton or Warren or whatever. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it's not the reason that voters in those states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, voted for Donald Trump. And I could tell you because I interviewed so many Trump supporters that literally they're right away, like if I said to them, if not Trump, who would you vote for? They said Bernie. I asked why. Because of these class issues. Not race issues, but class. That he's sticking up for me. He's always been on the side of unions and workers. And by the way, if Trump's victory was basically a race thing, well, you have to explain how 10% of voters who voted for Barack Obama switched over to Trump. Did they just become racist? I don't, they voted for a black man, many of them twice, and then switched over to Trump. So, although I understand why that African-American journalist at the Times might interpret it that way, a huge problem with journalism in general is it's all centered, whether you're a black journalist, a white journalist. If you're at the New York Times, you're making pretty decent money. That's just the truth. They make a lot of money at the New York Times. Most of those people in that room do not leave New York and hit the ground around the country. Most of them, even if they go on the campaign trail, are not like going in the trenches like I do or Jen does or Marcus does, speaking with people. They're just following the candidate around. They're very disconnected from the pulse of the country, not just the pulse of people in the middle of the country, but outside of New York and D.C. I see it when I come home after I'm on the road for a while. There's a disconnection. People live in a bubble, especially people that make decent money. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It's just human nature, You are what you see. You are what's around you, right? So when I'm not on the road for a while, and that's too often been the case, but putting aside that, yes, racism exists, Bernie Sanders just explained something that those Times reporters do not understand. Did you see their faces when he was explaining people are hurting, people are working 2 to 3 jobs, people are doing drugs and drinking and these kind of things? You could see on their faces and their body language, this is something that they might know about peripherally, but they don't understand it. They don't see it every day. It's why idiots like David Brooks write absurd pieces. I hope you didn't read this piece. He wrote a piece this morning being like, no, there's no class war. Billionaires are great. Bernie's in fantasy land. There's no class war. We need to drop him into Detroit, into some areas of Detroit and Flint. We'll see what you think in a couple weeks, David. Not endorsing violence on David Brooks, but, But that visual of Bernie basically saying there's a reason that people become so desperate, so angry, so hopeless that they will gravitate to a circus animal feeding them something different. Validating their anger at the political class in Washington, even a billionaire like Donald Trump. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.